Nazi Germany is perhaps more infamous for its weapons, such as tanks, which shaped the course of World War II from start to finish. Early on, they drove the Blitzkrieg with speed and precision. Later, in tougher campaigns, they proved resilient and deadly. Even as Allied forces caught up in technology, Germany's experienced crews and powerful machines, like the Panther, Tiger I, and Tiger II, kept them in the fight. These weren't just tanks. They were the backbone of a brutal and relentless war effort. And in this video, we'll look at every single one of them. So, let's start off this journey with Panzer IV. It was never the flashiest tank on the field, but the Panzer IV was always there, reliable, adaptable, and ready to take on whatever came next. Originally meant to support infantry, it quickly stepped into the main role when better armed enemy tanks started showing up. Unlike other early designs, the Panzer IV had room to grow. Its wider turret ring allowed it to be upgunned and reinforced, and that flexibility gave it a long life. More than 8,500 were produced, and its chassis supported other armored vehicles too, like the Jagdpanzer IV and the Wirbelwind. It saw action in every major theater Germany fought in, from deserts to frozen forests. Even after the war, it kept going. Some ended up in Syria decades later. It was never about perfection. The Panzer IV stuck around because it could be upgraded, repaired, and trusted, even when things got desperate. That's what made it matter. Panther. The Panther didn't just match the Soviet T-34, it tried to outthink it. Designed in the middle of the war under pressure, it came out sharp. Fast, well-armored up front, and deadly with its long-barreled 75mm gun, it handled long-distance fights with ease. Crews liked how it moved, and it punched through targets with precision. It wasn't perfect. Early models had serious mechanical issues, and it demanded well-trained operators to keep running. Still, it hit a balance that few tanks ever found. It was powerful without being clumsy, dangerous without being overbuilt. Around 6,000 were produced, and it stayed in service until the war ended. The Panther didn't rely on bulk or intimidation. It was about design. Sloped armor, efficient firepower, and solid range. It didn't just survive the battlefield, it helped shape how tanks would be built in the future. For Germany, it was one of the smartest machines they ever rolled out. Tiger I. The Tiger. I didn't sneak onto the battlefield. It announced itself. Its armor was thick, its gun was precise, and its silhouette meant business. The 88mm cannon didn't just pierce enemy tanks, it often disabled them before they got within firing distance. But the Tiger had its flaws. It was heavy, expensive, and a nightmare to transport or repair. Mud could freeze between its wheels and bring it to a halt. Still, Allied crews feared it. Even if only 347 were built, their presence shifted entire strategies. It wasn't meant to be efficient. It was built to win face-to-face duels. And when it had a well-trained crew, it usually did. Some broke down before they could reach the fight, but others stood their ground against overwhelming odds. The Tiger. I was complex, over-engineered, and tough to maintain. But when it worked, there was almost nothing on the field that could stand in its way. King Tiger. The Tiger II wasn't just heavy, it was massive. With armor thick enough to shrug off most Allied weapons and a cannon that tore through almost anything, it was Germany's final word in tank design. But it came at a cost. The engine was under strain from day one, and its weight limited where it could go. Bridges collapsed under it. Fuel vanished quickly. And when something broke, repairs took time, and parts were running out. But when it was working, it was terrifying. It could hold a crossroads on its own or stop an entire armored push. Only 492 were built, and they were sent into battle late in the war, often without enough fuel or support. Still, it made its mark. Crews who fought in them knew they had something powerful in their hands. The Tiger II wasn't practical, but it was unforgettable. Too late to win the war, but not too late to be feared. Panzer III. Before the heavy tanks showed up, the Panzer III was the face of German armor. Designed in the 1930s to fight other tanks, it carried a 37mm gun at first, later upgraded to a more capable 50mm. It saw its prime in the early years, Poland, France, North Africa, where its speed and reliability gave it an edge. But the war moved fast, and the Panzer III eventually couldn't keep up with new enemy designs. Still, it wasn't wasted. Its chassis became the foundation for the WWII, one of the most effective tank destroyers of the war. Even late in the conflict, some Panzer III were pulled from training schools and sent into battle when other options ran out. It wasn't flashy or overpowered, but it helped define Germany's early victories and proved that a solid, well-built machine could stay useful, even after the spotlight moved somewhere else. Panzer II. The Panzer II was never meant to carry the war. It was built as a stopgap, while heavier tanks were still being designed. But when fighting began, Germany didn't have the luxury of waiting. Light, fast, and easy to maintain, the Panzer II ended up leading the first wave across Poland and France. It wasn't heavily armored, and its 20mm autocannon wasn't enough to stop enemy tanks, but it moved quickly and helped deliver early victories. As the war progressed and stronger opponents appeared, it became clear that the Panzer II was outmatched. Still, it remained useful in roles like reconnaissance and training. Its chassis was repurposed for artillery carriers, flame tanks, and anti-aircraft guns. It even found a second life in static defenses across Europe. The Panzer II never had the fame or firepower of later models, but in those early years, when speed and numbers mattered most, it showed up and did the work. Sturmgeschütz III. The WWII wasn't made as a tank. It started as a mobile gun, meant to support infantry and knock out bunkers. No turret, no spotlight. But as the war dragged on, the WWII quietly became one of the most effective armored vehicles Germany ever produced. Mounted on the Panzer III chassis, it was simple, low to the ground, and surprisingly reliable. When Soviet armor began outmatching German tanks, the WWII got a longer gun and started hunting tanks instead. It wasn't flashy. It didn't dominate headlines. But with a skilled crew, it could knock out enemy armor and slip away before anyone returned fire. Over 10,000 were built, more than any other German armored vehicle. It served in nearly every campaign, from the Eastern Front to Italy. While others stole the glory, the WWII earned its place through consistency, not hype. No drama, no nonsense, just steel, firepower, and a job well done. Panzer 38T. The Panzer 38T wasn't German at all, it was Czech. Designed by Czechoslovakia's engineers before the war, it was taken over after Germany's occupation. And instead of discarding it, the Wehrmacht put it straight into battle. Solidly built, easy to repair, and more dependable than many early German designs, the 38T proved itself during campaigns in Poland and France. Its 37mm gun was modest, but in 1939 and 1940, it was more than enough. As stronger enemy tanks began appearing, the 38T lost ground. But the Germans didn't abandon it. Its chassis was turned into tank destroyers like the Marder III and Hetzer, machines that stayed in service long after the original tank had faded. Even late in the war, the 38T was still showing up in different forms across multiple fronts. It was never famous, never fearsome, but it was well-built, reliable, and worth more to Germany's war effort than its quiet reputation ever suggested. Panzer I. Long before the Tigers and Panthers, Germany had this little machine. The Panzer I wasn't built for battle. It was meant to train crews, to prepare industry, to test the waters. But war doesn't wait. Despite its thin armor and 2 machine guns that couldn't touch enemy tanks, it was thrown into real combat across Spain, Poland, France, North Africa, and even China. Its job wasn't to win duels, it was to support infantry and strike fast against soft targets. And in those early years, it played its part. As German tactics evolved, so did the Panzer Vars. Its chassis found new life in tank destroyers and defensive bunkers. Foreign militaries upgraded and reused it long after it was obsolete. It was outmatched from the start, but without it, there'd be no blitzkrieg. It wasn't powerful, but it was necessary, and it taught Germany how to build the steel monsters that came next. Jagdpanzer 38T. This one didn't roar. It waited, quiet and patient. The Hetzer was Germany's late war answer too, losing ground and running low on resources. Built on the Czech Panzer 38T chassis, it was cheap to make and brutally efficient. Its 75mm gun could knock out Shermans and T-34s from cover, and its thick, sloped armor turned enemy shots aside like water. Crews hated the cramped interior, and the gun had barely any sideways movement, so they had to pivot the whole tank to aim. But for ambushes, it was a killer. Hidden in hedgerows or forests, the Hetzer struck first, fast and hard. Over 2,800 were built in under 2 years, and it became Germany's most common tank destroyer by the end. After the war, it kept serving in Eastern Europe, proving just how solid the design was. It wasn't big, it wasn't flashy, but it did exactly what it was made to do, and that was enough. Panzer 35T. This wasn't even a German tank to begin with. The Panzer 35T was designed and built in Czechoslovakia, and when Germany took over in 1939, they simply kept it. Fast, reliable, and easy to drive, it gave the Wehrmacht a much-needed boost early on. Its 37mm main gun packed a decent punch for the time, and its armor, while light, worked against early Polish and French forces. The Germans added a 4th crew member, upgraded the radios, and threw it into battles across Europe and Russia. But as armor tech moved forward, the 35T couldn't keep up. On the Eastern Front, its systems struggled in the cold, and by 1942, it was phased out of German frontline service. Still, it lived on in Romania, Bulgaria, and Slovakia, and even served as a training tank well into the 1950s. It wasn't legendary, but it gave Germany numbers when they needed them most. Flame tanks. There was no mistaking what these machines were built for. Flame tanks weren't designed to fight other armor. They were designed to burn. Germany, Britain, the US, and the Soviets all used them, each in their own way. Germany built early models like the Flampanzer Fürst and the Thürth, but they often fell short and were later scrapped or converted. The real terror came from tanks like the Churchill Crocodile or the US Sherman Zippo. These weren't gimmicks. They were frontline tools made for breaking bunkers and flushing out defenders. On islands like Iwo Jima, when bullets and shells failed, the flame tanks finished the job. The sight of one rolling forward, torch-lit, was often enough to force surrender. But they came with risks, short range, high visibility, and a reputation so fierce that captured crews were sometimes executed. These tanks didn't just destroy, they terrified. And in brutal close-up war, that mattered. Duplex drive tanks. They looked ridiculous. Canvas skirts, propellers, tanks pretending to be boats, but on D-Day, they were the first to hit the water. The duplex drive tanks were Shermans and Valentines with flotation screens and rear-mounted propellers. The idea was bold. Launch them from the sea, let them swim to shore, and hit enemy lines before the infantry got there. And in places, it worked. At Sword and Gold Beach, they reached land and made a difference. But in Omaha, it was a disaster. High waves sank most before they ever got close. Still, where they succeeded, they gave landing troops instant firepower. Crews trained for weeks, learning to steer, float, and fight all in one machine. It was risky, experimental, and not without loss. But it proved one thing. When you're planning the biggest invasion in history, you bring everything you've got, even tanks that float. Especially tanks that float. Elephant. The Elephant wasn't designed from scratch. It was built from leftovers. After Porsche lost the Tiger contract, 91 of its heavy chassis were repurposed into tank destroyers, and what they created was a beast. The Elephant carried an 88mm PaK 43 gun that could punch through anything long before enemy tanks could fire back. Its frontal armor was absurdly thick, up to 200mm. But its size, weight, and overcomplicated drivetrain made it a nightmare to maintain. At Kursk, it killed in droves but couldn't recover itself when damaged. Early versions didn't even have a machine gun for close defense. Crews were isolated, mechanical issues were constant, and breakdowns were common. Still, when positioned well, it could wipe out Soviet armor without ever moving an inch. Renamed Elephant after upgrades, it remained brutally effective on defense, but far too clumsy for fast war. It was less of a tank and more of a steel monument with a gun. Panzer VIII Maus. The Maus was supposed to be unstoppable. Nearly 190 tons, a 128mm main gun, and armor so thick that nothing could realistically break through it. On paper, it was terrifying. In reality, it was dead weight. It couldn't cross most bridges, couldn't be transported easily, and couldn't keep up with any unit it was meant to support. Built too late to fight, only 2 prototypes were ever completed. It used a hybrid electric drive, much like Porsche's earlier designs, and had enough internal complexity to guarantee frequent breakdowns. Top speed. Just over 8 mph in testing. It could crush anything in its path, if it ever got there. Hitler loved it. Guderian hated it. The Soviets found one after the war, bolted the working turret onto the other chassis, and hauled it off to a museum. It never made it to combat and never needed to. The Maus had already proven that bigger isn't always better. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, then like and subscribe. We'll see you very soon.